Here on One Now, Billy Kay presents part 2 of his series on the language of Lowland Scotland, the mother tongue.
Well, gave me her promise, which ne'er forgot shall be for the body, Lordy. I would lay me down and deep.
Sergeant Bilko's America was just one of the new lands that absorbed the Scots diaspora of the 18th and 19th centuries. But it was to Ulster in the 1600s that thousands of lowlanders flocked, attracted by James VI's official plantation west of the Bann and the lands available in Down and Antrim. Their religion, architecture and dialect are integral to the identity of the area. You can hear Ulster Scots every night of the week at the inn of Ballinure in the farming heartland near Larne. Ernie Scott.
In my generation, I was getting reared in the early 30s, and it had become, through the advent of the radio, or as we called it in them days, the wireless, it had become most unfashionable. In fact, I will mind the butcher used to come in every Wednesday with a butcher's kilt, and my mother didn't particularly want any meat this day, and she told me to go out and tell Lil Arthur that she didn't want those, and I was about 8 years of age. I walked out with my hands in my pockets and said to Arthur she didn't want anything the day, and walked back in again to be met by a hustler in the lug. Because I didn't speak properly, I should have said that, thank you, she didn't want any meat today.
Well, wee Wally, he was fiddling, sitting on a chair. He was rendering his version of the London dairy air. He's no good at the best of times, but he's worse when drinks is spilling. It was just a bit of squeaking at a hen that was a killing. That ended up the party. It was a pure disgrace. Broken bows and cups and saucers scattered out of the place. There were some took home in donkeys' kilts, and some of them were carried. And yet you daren't mention the day Big Mal was married.
You see, it's come down to this day for the 1600s and the 1700s. But, as I said before, it's dying away.
As long as you're alive, it'll stay for a while yet.
Well, nobody knows how long that's going to be.
Cheers.
That most favoured of Scots legacies, whisky, is made at Bush Mills on the North Antrim coast, the oldest licensed distillery in the world.
We'll grab it, Alison. See what that is.
The people of Bush Mills are descended from Renfrewshire, Ayrshire and Galloway folk who left Scotland 300 years ago, but you can still recognise the characteristic words and long vowel sounds of the broad western tongue.
This is getting here 49, half 5. Say 50.
I'll try some of your hot whisky.
Well, no help for me, John. Just give me a black.
Well, you would be up, but wouldn't you? Oh, God, this trip's not running too well today.
It's called the hands of yourself.
What was that word you used for the spoot there?
Strip. The strip.
I think that's an old Scottish word.
That's very old.
Robin, would folk of your generation still use words like stroop?
Oh, we would use strip. With the whisky being made, it's like the water comes for the burn up the back. Like, you know, that's sort of words that we would use around here. Even in the younger generation from the older generation, like, you know. And we would use it like a lead or a yard, loaning. We'd get in a loaning.
Jimmy, when you were a boy, would you say it was even broader then? What are some of the expressions you can make?
It was very much broader there. Like something like, supposing you were going to school. You didn't want to go to school, so you took one of these 10 o'clock headaches you talk about. Your mother used to say to you, oh, just run on, it's far for your ears, you'll not kill you.
Aye. Robin, when you go off of this area, are you aware that you talk with a rig broad Scotch?
Well, I was outside Belfast, like, and I went into a shop to buy something, and I started, you know, just speaking, forgetting where I was at, like, and She says, the woman says to me, what part of Scotland are you from? I said, I don't know, I'm not from Scotland. I said, I'm from the North Coast. And she says, well, you're not far away from Scotland.
Aye.
I says, I know, like.
Would you say that your whiskey's as good as Scotch whiskey?
Sure, we taught you how to make the blooming stuff and you still don't know how to make it.
While Scots put down roots and thrived over in Ulster, at home its prestige as a written and a spoken language was continually under threat from the Union of the Crowns in 1603 to the Union of the Parliaments in 1707. The 18th century saw the start of the Scots' obsession with talking proper. Following the Union, cultural schizophrenia was rampant among the upper echelons of society, who now took their cue from London in matters of taste. Increased contact with English and the later fashion for Augustan refinement meant that even the great men of the Scottish Enlightenment felt inadequately provincial in matters of speech and writing. David Hume is said to have sent his treatise on human nature to a Norwich cobbler to have it expunged of Scotticisms before publication. He described Scots typically as a very corrupt dialect, while others published lists of Scotticisms to be avoided in genteel circles. Ironically, most of them are still used in our English today. I'm going to my bed should of course be I'm going to bed. Language teachers like the Irishman Sheridan made a crock of gold from Scots' anxieties.
Sir, madam, I will endeavour to persuade you of the necessity of being conscious of the vulgar improprieties in speech commonly used in North Britain. Now, Mistress Melville, what is the past perfect of to prove?
Proven, evidently, as in not proven.
A gross impropriety, madam, to King's English is proved. Mr. Melville, you are a landed man. Tell me, what do you call a field with a fence in which you graze animals?
Though as a park, is it no?
No, it's an enclosure. And to use 3 Scotticisms in the one sentence verges on the barbaric.
Well, how can you learn of English if you're angry at it all the time?
I am not angry at you. I am angry with you. And I am not learning you. I am teaching you.
Look, it's a different tongue altogether. And it is awful hard to mind. Remember, that these new foreign expressions.
Jesus! Hard to remember new fashioned expressions. Sure enough, that's diabolical English, so it is. And if you must needs interject, I insist it be in the mother tongue. Now, according to Mr. Beatty's book, you also managed to confound bear with boar. Now, a bear is a large, shaggy, unwieldy animal. A boar is a male swine.
Well, there are many so-called Scotticisms, you know, some of which go a long way back. For instance, the expression to let on, don't let on that you're here. Well, that's a 16th century expression. I mean, it's already on record in 16th century Scots. To see somebody the length of the, you know, this one, which is the source of amusement among the 18th century Anglicisers, to see somebody the length of the bus stop.
The Prime Minister, Pitt the Younger, couldn't resist taking the mickey when his Scottish manager Dundas requested a horse the length of the Highgate.
My dear Dundas. I'm afraid His Majesty's government does not possess a horse quite as long as the one you have requested. But I shall endeavour to supply you with the longest steed in Westminster. Your humble servant, Pitt.
Communicating with the English remains a problem. Iris Macpherson from Murrayshire.
I was down in London for my holidays, and I was bidding with a friend. And she says to me this day, she says, would you like lentils to your dinner in the morning? And I said, yeah, why? I wouldn't mind lentils. Well, she says, away you go, she says, then, and get a ham end. And I says, a ham end, and she says, away. So away I goes to the shop. She tells me the shop to go to. And I goes up to the counter and I says to the money, I said, can I have a ham end, please? Which I thought was my very best English. He looked at me and he says, a what? And I said, a ham end. He looked at again and he says, a what? And I says, a ham end for making soup, the end piece of a ham. So he clapped me in the shoulder like this and he says, come along here. And he took me away for the rest of the folk up there, but the shop myself. And he goes, I was bent the back and he came down with a lump of bacon. It was about that length. Round in a thon gauzy stuff, you can. And he says, is it a piece of that you want? And I said, no. I says, I'm wanting a ham end. And he looked at. He says, clapped me in the shoulder and he says, I'll tell you what to do. He says, run along home for a line, love. So, I goes out to the shop, I was block of fronted. I went out to the shop anyway, and I'm passing us down the street, and I'm going looking on the shop window. Here lying in all its glory was a ham end. So I goes into the shop and I says to the wife here, I says, can I get that, please? And she says, certainly. So she left to the window and I says, what do you call it? She says, oh, she says, this is a knuckle of bacon. And I says, well, I says, I'll have this knuckle of bacon.
Scots is strong in the northeast, despite the death wish of the minister of Peterhead in 1796, who hoped the corrupt dialect would be reformed with the arrival of polite people in the town in summer. But the propaganda was effective, and many Scots today have little trace of their origin in their accent.
Well, I think the main advantage of standard English is comprehensibility. I mean, the fact that it can be understood everywhere. And I think that's possibly one of the reasons why I speak as I do. I did a lot of acting, a lot of debating, public speaking at school and at university. And you strive, no doubt, for clarity. And I think particularly as the principal of a school teaching English to foreigners, it's essential that what you say is clear and understood.
This attitude produced some strange linguistic hybrids like Kelvin Side.
Well, it's difficult to know much about dialects. Well, it's difficult to know much about accents in the past, but it rather looks as if Kelvin Side reflects some of the features of the London upper-class accent of the 18th century. In other words, the time when the upper and middle classes in Scotland were actually adopting London speech so far as they were able. And although this has fallen out of the sort of educated speech of England, it seems to have been sort of fossilised in certain areas like Kelvin Side and Morningside and Kensington Hay in London.
James Boswell, aristocrat and man of letters, was brought up at Auchinleck along the road from Robert Burns. His attitude to Scots and Scottish culture was one of disdain.
I think it was as much as anything else a rebellion against his father, who spoke broad Scotch and refused to change, where James wanted to be with it and to be a man of the moment, and saw his future actually as being somebody who did speak English, because most of the successful people did that.
Was there a big split in the family then, linguistically, in those days?
I think anything that could irritate his father would help at times.
Many of the lines drawn in the 18th century remain with us today. Language identity is still often determined by social position.
I don't think that's better at all. Look, it's that side that's not in anyway. In the end of the day, you'll have to cut something off that side of it to get it to wedge in as well. What?
Gee, listen here. To get the hecht right.
Get what?
The hecht right. The height right. See that side here? See where it's sandy? Keep.
Why don't you cut off the round bit of that log?
Oh, whoa.
Look, Wallace. Right. This bit. Why don't, if you cut off this round bit here, then the whole thing will fit in, won't it?
No, see, that's not the same bit. The same bit is. That's where the same bit is, in there, at the belly. See it?
Nearby lies one of the farms Robert Burns tenanted, now leased by Wallace Borland.
The evening star tells Boston time is near, my jaw and doos and fray the furrowed field return.
out to mine like that, number 26 out, the ball.
Well, I was born up the road, and my father to now Loch Lee 20 years ago, and we've been in here ever since.
What kind of beast do you keep here?
Well, it's mostly coos. We've 80 to 90 dairy coos, a wheel of yows, maybe 50 yows, and we grow 50, 60 acre of barley.
And is it much the same sizes and much the same activities as in Burnsday?
Well, in all the books, I think it would be 6 kye and new of 80 kye and just 2 or 3 sheep.
So it was a lot weirder in the other days.
Aye.
But you'll still be raking in the cellar like Burns?
Well, I don't know. I think the only thing I've got in common with Burns is we're pair.
Ironically, resistance to English and gentility was led by judges like the Lords Braxfield and Kames, who retired from the Court of Session with the immortal words, "Fare you all weel, ya bitches." Others, like Clark or Penny Cook, gave as good as they got when the House of Lords sneered.
My Lord Chancellor, my client roped the hounds by the burn of cleash for more than 200 years. Now, over 200 years, every other hairst they have told muckle floods. See, 40 years syne, they got the oraloons stracking the water, saying, big up the banks to protect the land. Now, their neighbour, the new miller, claims the use of the water for himself alone, but you know, anybody with meds can see.
Mr. Clark, do you spell water with 2 T's in Scotland?
No, my lord, we didn't spell water with 2 T's. But we spell manners with 2 N's.
The poet Alan Ramsay initiated a revival of literary Scots, republishing the poetry of the medieval Makars and railing against the precious fashion of condemning anything Scots as barbarous. His own Gentle Shepherd was a very popular pastoral play, intermingling highly wrought English with rustic Scots. But he could also describe city life with gutsy realism, as did his great successor, Robert Ferguson.
Frae joyous tavern, reeling drunk, with fiery fizz and een half sunk, behold the bruiser, fey to all that in the reek of Gardays fall. When feet in dirty gutters plash, and folk to wail their footsteps fash, at night the macaroni drunk, in pools and gutters oft times sunk. Hey, what a frecht he new appears, when he his corpse dejected rears. Look at that head, and think if there the pommet slaistered up his hair. The cheeks observe, where now could shine the scanson glories o' carmine? Ah, legs, in vain the silkworm there displayed to view her ident care. For stink instead of perfumes grow, and clarty odours fragrant flow.
The literature continues almost in spite of the establishment attitude to the language. But is it any easier for the writer today?
No, I think it's arguably harder today. Because at least in those times the divide was clear. You know, you could choose a side. You either wrote in Scots, you wrote in English. I think the kind of erosion that's taken place in the language since then means that you're frequently going 2 horses at once, that you may not yourself, in fact, know what you speak. And I know that for myself, because of my experience in primary school, I mean, I spoke a kind of Scots until I was 5. And when I went to primary school, I discovered that what we called the brace was actually a mantelpiece. And what we called the ossole was really a fireplace. And the whole house was redecorated with English words. And since then, I think, I've had to inhabit that kind of dichotomy. I mean, you could argue that you should deliberately go back and express yourself in Scots entirely. But I think that's false. I think all you can do is inhabit the paradox.
In the 18th century, for instance, there was quite a strong pressure, a strong prejudice on the part of the Scots bourgeoisie against Scots speech. I mean, they sort of adopted Burns, but at the same time, as you know, there are many indications that they also, to some extent, despised him as, you know, the Couthé ploughman poet. And it wasn't till the 19th century that the establishment in Scotland took on board the notion that there was a Scottish language and that it was valuable, though they always added that it was dying. So this notion of sort of two grades of language is an old one.
A contemporary critique of Burns read, "One bar indeed his birth and education have opposed to his fame, the language in which most of his poems were written." Posterity thought otherwise, as Scott and Burns enjoyed worldwide success based on their achievements in Scots rather than in English. For intellectual fashion was changing, and the European Romantic movement saw Scots as expressing the pure natural genius of an unsophisticated peasant culture. The Scots themselves swallowed the myth, and the Romantic descended to the mawkish. The universal in Burns's work was reduced to the parochial by the Kailyard school that followed. With the literature at its lowest ebb, and Anglicisation proceeding unchecked, another genius writing in Scots was to emerge.
Well, I think it happened because the Great War was ostensibly fought on behalf of gallant little Belgium or gallant little Serbia, and this got people thinking that there was a value in small countries, and as part of the value of small countries, there was the value of indigenous languages. And of course, the great poet Hugh MacDiarmid was a native speaker of Scots and discovered, almost by chance, that he had more power when he wrote in Scots than when he wrote in English, and that's how the whole thing took off.
Drawing on the two native traditions, Sorley MacLean in Gaelic and Christopher Grieve, alias Hugh MacDiarmid in Scots, sought to expand the range and scope of their languages, making them vigorous and new.
Running our nets out in line with the stacks, wi' our ain brown sails clashed down at our feet. There's nae white to be seen, save yon tin face o' a moon, till we haul up sign when our shot may compete. Gannet haud wide, swing a war on the boys. It's my watch tonight while we lie to the nets, and I'm blithe to be where the heart of darkness wins back sae muckle day I needs forgets. And I ken the morn will pit in at North Row, and I'll see with the lassies in the guttin ranks there, the wee whalesy lassie I loo best of all, wi' a wreath of white gulls round her bonny brown hair. Aye, when her skinkling tresses she combs, she's bonnier than ocht on the floury homes. Filling our cran baskets and swinging them up, and along in the trolleys, a look and a smile, a word in the by gain, and if I'm lucky, a touch, will haud me gain again for another while.
When a friend offered Grieve this house on Whalsey in Shetland, he was at a low ebb financially and spiritually. The local community rallied round to the point of knitting or macking clothes for the family.
Can you mind Versken on? You mind when the Grieves was here? You mind when they came here, then she couldn't mack me. No, no. And I can mind her coming down to Medder, and she was, well, they had nothing, they were that they laugh. And I mind Medder giving her a piece waskel a yarn. And she sat, and he sat and went the clothes out and she sat and made a blanket. And then she had that mark, as Charlie was doing all the mark.
Yes, yes. I was at the marking.
Well, what did you make?
Well, I think it was Billy Champers for Mike.
The boy?
The boy. And socks.
But they were not very well off. They were just very poor. And she ate them down, she was that blind all about the fish and butter and that kind of things for
yes,
neighbours
yes,
the year. And the neighbours, they had here a bra lock stuff, just the kind of, well, they kind of thought that elbow. The pretty boy, he wasn't very old. I can mind the putting them down to west when they do the Y time, and they laughed at Michael down the side west. When she came back then, she said we were just entirely spoiled them. Yeah.
While Shetlanders, who don't even count themselves as Scots, supported the father of the Renaissance, in the south he provoked violent reaction amongst the Scots literati with his Lalland's synthesis of words from different dialects and periods. In 1946, the Glasgow Herald fanned the controversy that raged across its letter pages by sending up the language in its editorials. the argument is still not dum deed.
In my opinion, some of the early achievements of MacDermot in the lyric were terrific. I think some of the later Scottish poems MacDermot wrote are, you know, they give a new meaning to the unspeakable Scots, as Scots such as nobody ever spoke. And I think that kind of, you know, willful synthesis of a false Scots, for me, achieves not much at all.
A view shared by the poet Edwin Muir, who originally praised MacDermot's Scots, but concluded that the English tradition offered the only hope for Scottish writers.
In the 30s, Muir came back to live in Scotland in the middle of the slump, got very discouraged about the whole Scottish thing, and said he could see no future for it. MacDermot regarded this as a betrayal. And I think Muir was unfortunate in his timing, because he made these remarks against Scots just before the second generation of Scots writing poets inspired by MacDermot came along.
Just a few of these authors are William Souter from Perth, the writer of superb bairn rhymes, Violet Jacob from an aristocratic Angus background, and the Lanarkshire writer Robert MacLellan, whose plays are staged regularly in the professional theatre and are popular with the young. At Perth High School, The Changeling, a border tale of sheep reaving, is rehearsed by teenage pupils.
A giddy out? See here, woman. Help me with the clays out of the cradle.
The clays out of the cradle?
Aye, the clays out of the cradle. My hands are a blood.
But what for do you want the clays?
For the yow, woman. It's a rare chance. We'll have to wheel up and cover the horns. Gee. Aye. Gae to the winnock and keek through the shutter. Tell me when you see a move. Aye.
The effect of the Scottish Renaissance is still with us, though even MacDermot used English in his later poetry. Like the rest of us, writers are heir to both traditions.
I think it's a choice. I think it's a continuing choice. In other words, I think it's not necessarily a choice that you resolve one off and say that's me decided. I think anybody who says, I will write always in Scots, and if they've had the kind of bilingual education that most Scots have, you know, quite deliberately amputates a part of their own potential. And I think that's a very dangerous thing to do. By the same token, I think if you know, deliberately extirpate all Scots, you do the same kind of thing. I think there can be some kind of fruitful crossbreeding there. I think there has to be, because I see no other, you know, rational way to progress.
Violet Jacob, née Violet Kennedy Erskine, was born into an ancient noble family from the house of Dun near Montrose. She is one of the delightful exceptions emerging to contradict any hard and fast rules about language, proving that an individual's response can surmount social conditioning. Her feel and affinity for the Rockall tongue can be heard in the stories and lyrics she left behind.
Oh, tell me if it was on your road, your roaring northern wind, as ye come blowing frae the land that's never frae my mind. My feet they travel England, and I'm being for the north. My man saw the siller tides run up the Firth of Forth, and far up in Angus straths I saw the wild geese flee, a long, long ski